Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, episode 253. I'm your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
Joining you from September 1st, mind you, which is a lot of things. It's football season first and foremost. It's fall, not technically, but whatever. And I guess it's fall TV season too. At least for us, it feels like we're feasting on good shows. Yeah, it's a good time to be all right.
I think this is the first time I forgot to say, on this podcast we cover video games and everything happening in the industry. Usually I have that at the beginning, but I forgot this time. But hey, first time for everything. And yeah, plenty of TV stuff going on. We got Game of Thrones, well, House of the Dragon, but obviously it's in the realm of Game of Thrones. So we got the day we're recording this, September 1st, Lord of the Rings Rings of Power comes out tonight, which I'm really excited for. Most expensive show ever made. So, and from what I've read, in terms of the production, the budget is obvious. So I can't wait to watch that and see. Yeah, we've got an interesting show here. We're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff. So let's hop right in. First up in the rundown, we have a new Mafia game in development. So during an interview celebrating the Mafia franchise's 20th anniversary, Hangar 13 announced that an all-new Mafia project is in the works, but is, quote, a few years away. Now, obviously neither of us are huge Mafia people, Dom. We're kind of familiar with Mafia 3 because that was the topic of conversation during the time in which we've done the podcast for several reasons, one of which being the lack of commercial success and critical success that game saw. People talked about how it was an interesting setting. It took place in New Orleans in the South, and obviously it had an African-American protagonist. For me, Dom, I think my hope for this is that it's a series like soft reboot. I hope it's not Mafia 4. I hope it's just Mafia something. And I think that'd have a better chance to get people in because I would be more interested, honestly. Obviously, sure, they can release Mafia 4 and say it doesn't, attach to any of the previous games. But I think for general audiences, not having that number attached makes it more welcoming. Would you agree?
Yeah, I know they just did like a remake of the first game, I believe.
The
That
definitive
looked,
edition, yeah.
yeah, that always like I remember seeing clips and it looked really good, but I never, I never got more curious than that to try it out, and I certainly never tried out 2 or 3. So yeah, I think it does. It makes it more inviting to new people. I think you're right. If they don't continue on with the numbers, you know, how I don't know if there's anything much that they could do to grab someone like me personally, but um, I guess if it got you and then you told me to play it, then I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll try it out. That's
Yeah, or I
that's the
mean, if
job
the
they gotta
general
do.
consensus when it came out right is that it was like 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, like it was that good.
Right? Yeah.
Uh, and hopefully there's a good budget behind it. My hope is that regardless of if it's like a soft reboot or if it's Mafia 4, that Hangar 13 and 2K put the original 3, whether that's the OG version of 1 or the definitive edition on like Game Pass and PS Plus, in like a marketing push before the game comes out. I think that'd be really smart. It'd give me a chance to hop in because like you said, the definitive edition of it looks cool, but it's much easier for me to download and try it out if it's already included on the service I pay for as opposed to paying more money for it regardless if it's constantly on sale.
Yeah,
So,
and that's where it's tough because it was a PS Plus game that I know I had redeemed, and I don't even think I ever even downloaded it. So maybe I should have. The third game that is was on PS Plus.
yeah. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Mafia is an interesting series and I do think it has a chance to like capture a bigger audience. I think they just need to absolutely nail it because first of all, the franchise name isn't all that inspiring. Like you have Grand Theft Auto, and though they're not similarly like the same, just calling a series Mafia is kind of bland in a way. And then on top of it, I think you have to nail the narrative aspects of that because the gameplay can only go so far because it's rooted in so much realism. Of it being like actual happenings throughout, obviously fictitious versions of the stuff that happened in history, but like you're not gonna have a mafia member with like superpowers or like you know what I mean. So you kind of have to nail the narrative aspects of it and make the gameplay engaging in some aspect. So we'll see what happens. But like they said, it's years away, so we can ruminate on the idea of what the next mafia is, but we don't know. Which is interesting because 2K as a publisher outside of like NBA I think their next big release we're hoping for is the new BioShock, right?
Oh yeah, we're hoping.
Yeah, by Cloud Chamber. So, speaking of a developer, we hope their game is good. That's the best segue I had. Quantic Dream got purchased. So, Quantic Dream developers of Detroit Become Human and the upcoming Star Wars Eclipse, and many other games, has been acquired by Chinese tech giant NetEase. Nothing was announced in regard to leadership change or the future of David Cage with the studio. For the uninitiated, Quantic Dream faced allegations in recent years of a toxic workplace, said to consist of things like crunch culture, offensive and inappropriate emails and jokes and comments. And then Quantic Dream actually responded by suing the French publications reporting these stories about the supposed workplace issues. One thing I didn't realize, and maybe we had talked about on the podcast, Dom, is NetEase already owned a part of Quantic Dream. This is kind of them scooping them up and finishing the job. Interesting that there's no say about leadership change with David Cage. If I was Star Wars or NetEase, I'd be a little bit hesitant about this in terms of Star Wars investing and giving their IP to them, and then obviously NetEase purchasing them. Do you think it's like a very tight rope for him and like the culture there? I think they're giving him the benefit of the doubt for now, but if anything were to happen, it's like you're gone.
Yeah, you like to think. I mean, what's been happening though, right? Because a lot of those reports were like, this is how it is here on a regular basis, right? So have things improved since that stuff came out? It's hard to imagine, at least certainly not to the extent which they need to improve. So it's not, to me, it's like stuff is probably still shitty there as a place to work, for chunks or, certain types of people there. So it's like if there's another report about it of something specific that comes out, I don't know. I just, part of me kind of hopes that this game, the Star Wars game specifically, Eclipse, is just way far out, or even, to be honest, I don't want to say like I hope it gets canceled or something, but like I just dread the day of having to make that decision of like, should I play this? Should I support this guy? And that whole thing that a lot of people are doing right now with Hogwarts Legacy, right? So, I would hope that, I would assume and hope that, they're on a short leash as far as, what's going on over there and how Star Wars and NetEase and all their stakeholders are concerned.
I mean, so if I was a studio lead, or even if I was part of like the team at NetEase managing their publishing house, or the people that run over, like look over their developers, I would obviously look into the company, see if the culture has changed, and if it has, leading up to the game's announcement or release, I would have journalists come in and anonymously interview staff, and because if it has turned around, get those stories of good faith and everything turning around. It's that way when this game does come to fruition, people like you aren't sitting there having to make that choice. Like, we know that it's changed, you know what I mean? And I think that'd be good for the game. That'd be my plan. Obviously, that's asking a lot, considering studios, especially somebody like David Cage, doesn't seem like the type of person that wants people going in there and investigating. But if you are working to turn things around, they could use a positive PR to any capacity,
Yeah, I mean, I know you know this, but I'm going to say that's very naive of a hope. Because think about David Cage, right? At this point, I don't know how old this guy is, but he's a full-grown adult who has, made a lot of critically acclaimed games, probably made a lot of money. Just doesn't strike me as the type of person who's just going to actually admit to having a shitty culture at his workplace, let alone actually trying to change it. I mean, instead they're just suing that journalist or whatever that site was or whatever. So like, it just doesn't. And
I'm looking at it from like Star Wars NetEase's perspective, not necessarily Quantic Dream from the top down. But like, when you're looking at like the pure numbers and the business aspect of it, that's a smart business move for them to do, to give the optics of that developer they just spent money on a facelift of sorts. But we'll see what happens.
I mean, he's just got to go. Sometimes it's like, some people aren't going to change, and if you really want everything else to survive. Like guys like that gotta go. He'll be fine. You know, I'm
And
sure
it's
he's loaded and whatever.
exactly, and it is weird because Quantic Dream always felt like a studio PlayStation should have bought long ago, right? They just
Yeah,
the relationship they had, but it seems like yeah, there was a reason they probably didn't for one reason or another.
maybe that's it. Yeah.
And yeah, and now NetEase purchased them, who's a Chinese company, and I don't want to sound xenophobic, but like between Tencent and NetEase, they aren't necessarily companies who strike confidence for me in terms of people buying stuff, and it is a hesitancy of just the unknown of they have so much money, but they're not as familiar to gaming audiences as the bigger publishers were familiar with. So I kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but also I am a little bit worrisome. A story I didn't include this week is that who it was Tencent and PlayStation now have a cumulative ownership of 30% of From Software,
That's right.
which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy. Tencent's at 16 and PlayStation is at 14.
I'm sure they both would have loved to get more.
Exactly.
But couldn't for whatever reasons. Yeah.
So yeah, it's always worrisome, but you know, I like I said, I don't want to come across xenophobic because when we talk about these American companies, it's like, oh, we're a little bit more familiar, it's okay, and then with these Chinese companies, it's like, oh, be fearful, and that might not actually be the case. We just have to wait and see for better or worse. Next up, a new Assassin's Creed was revealed. Dom, well, it was leaked, and then Ubisoft's like, take down all the photos, we'll reveal it ourselves a couple of hours later. So this is from Ryan Dinsdale over IGN. Ubisoft has officially unveiled Assassin's Creed Mirage following the leak earlier on September 1st. I'm going to interject here. We talked about this leak like weeks ago, too. This has been a rumbling forever. So their tweet read, Assassin's Creed Mirage is the next Assassin's Creed game. We can't wait to tell you more on September 10th at Ubisoft Forward at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If that date sounds familiar, that's the day after the Marvel Disney Games Showcase. So hopefully we can get a good weekend of announcements there. So a new image of the game was revealed in that tweet, showing presumably the protagonist, rumored to be Assassin's Creed Valhalla's Basim, which we talked about before. And he looks like he's dropping in on assassination. The rumors have suggested this is much closer in both structure and gameplay to the original, like, first 3 Assassin's Creed games, Dom. And that has me excited. I like the RPG open world that Assassin's Creed has evolved into, but I also enjoy the classic way in which Assassin's Creed was designed. And I would love if we enter a place in which we get the big Assassin's Creed open world titles, but alongside them, ever so often, we do get these smaller, vintage, classic Assassin's Creed experiences. What do you think? Is there any way Assassin's Creed can pull you in? Would it be this smaller scoped title, or how do you feel about this project?
Yeah, I think for me, like the most enjoyment I got out of Assassin's Creed were the first couple games. I don't know. I think I look forward to that gameplay again. So yeah, like more focusing on stealth and combat and less so on some of like the RPG elements in the bigger world and that kind of stuff. Like I think I'd be more into that. That being said, not Valhalla, but the one in Greece was called
Odyssey.
Odyssey, of course. The best part about that game was the protagonist, Cassandra. Like she was great. A lot of the other characters are great too, and all that kind of stuff. So like, if this game, also has a cool protagonist, even looking back, the first game, the protagonist was just kind of a guy. And the second game though, like, is when we start with Ezio, and Ezio was fantastic as well. So I think that's a big part of it too, not just necessarily the change in the gameplay or the structure, how the game is structured, all that kind of stuff. But I hope that it also has like a cool protagonist again, and that more than anything is what would draw me in. But it also, like, as days go by, as I get older, smaller games are a little bit easier to digest in general. So probably that's more what you're asking, maybe. But I look forward to that instead of what I think Chris was talking about, having spent over 100 hours in Valhalla, something like that. So
Yeah, I think the intimacy of those other games is cool because one problem I've seen in the modern Assassin's Creed titles is that sure, you can technically assassinate targets, but it doesn't feel as rewarding. Whereas like when I remember playing the Ezio trilogy and the original Assassin's Creed, you felt the kill. Shout out to Michael Huber of Easy Allies. You felt the kill, and it felt like like I said before, an intimate connection because there was a reason you were going after the specific person, and it did rely more on stealth. One thing, I may be in the minority on this, Dom. Do you remember the OG Assassin's Creed multiplayer? It was so fun.
No,
Very
I don't think I ever messed with
underrated.
that.
Yeah, it was basically, it'd be like, 6 assassins on the same map, and you would get a target on your screen. Everyone would have a target to kill out of all the players, and you would have to like hide in the crowds and try to kill each other. It was really fun. It didn't last very long in terms of the titles they put it in, but very underrated. I doubt it'll come back, but maybe one day to some capacity. One thing I wanted to mention too, the setting of this game is going to be in Baghdad, which is cool because it's not normally a setting
okay.
we get. So that's going to be super interesting. Yeah, I just want to see more of this game and what the scope and the gameplay focus is. Because I do think it'd be rather successful for a lot of people yearning for not only smaller titles these days, but classic Assassin's Creed, because that community for that franchise is pretty divided of people who want what Assassin's Creed was and people who enjoy the modern take on it. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, I didn't look into it. I don't know if, for clarification, if the Ubisoft Forward is specifically about this game or if it's actually Ubisoft Forward. I'll have to look into that. I'm hoping it's the latter, so maybe we can get some announcements. One of the things a little tinfoil hat theory I have, Dom, is with this happening the day after the Marvel game showcase. I wonder if maybe we get an additional look at a Ubisoft Disney Marvel game that gets shown the previous day.
Interesting. I
Maybe
hope
a
so.
Star Wars title,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
Or the balls.
Not getting my hopes
blue.
up. Yeah. Speaking of getting your hopes up, Dom, is it the Legend of Zelda Month of Dreams in September 2022? According to both GamesBeat's managing editor Mike Minotti and Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb, a Nintendo Direct presentation focused on announcements related to The Legend of Zelda is set to take place in September of 2022. Minotti of GamesBeat went on to clarify, "To be clear, guys, the only thing we are very, very sure of is being announced at this Direct are the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports for Switch." Jeff Grubb then added, "Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of Zelda stuff at this thing. I think this is like a Zelda blowout for Nintendo. 100% there's a Nintendo Direct in September. It's that simple. There is still some uncertainty about whether this will be a general Direct, maybe a mini. There was some talk of it being a partner Direct as well." End quote. So it seems like they're
I didn't hear
confirming
any
that
of this. Oh man.
Oh, really? Shocking news, Dom.
Wonderful news.
Well, and the fact that they're saying for sure Wind Waker and Twilight are like the floor of what we can assume is there. Obviously, the dream is Breath of the Wild 2 gets a title at the very least, maybe not a date.
We can see a little more of it. That'd be cool, of course.
My hope would be maybe a remake from the team who did Link's Awakening or just a 2D Zelda title announcement as well would be awesome. Maybe what's the rhythm game? Did that get a sequel yet? Cadence of Hyrule?
Cadence of Hyrule, yep. It did not get a sequel. It got a little bit of DLC that I never messed with that I've been meaning to go back for. But no, that would be cool, a sequel to that. Or something, I think I predicted something like this, where a different indie studio would take on another Zelda game or something. I can't remember what I said.
My other hope would be that if it's not necessarily Zelda focused, maybe we could get the Metroid Prime trilogy announcement released too. So it's like the 2 Zelda games plus that'd be fun as well. I'm just thinking of like thematically how they could pair them. My personal pie in the sky is if it's a partner direct, Silksong, please give us a date.
Yeah.
The weird thing is, remember, it was in the Xbox showcase saying that everything was coming out in the next 12 months. So it's seemingly coming out before next June.
Right.
So
it's like that could have been a mistake, I guess, where like they
no,
forgot.
I don't think so.
But that seems unlikely that they would let something like that slip. They know that that's specifically something people are really looking forward to. So I doubt that they would screw something like that up.
Yeah, and usually we get individual Pokemon Directs, but I hope we get some new tidbit of information since this will be like a month before or 2 months before the new Pokemon titles. We'll see, but it's cool that they're like, yeah, the base is we're getting Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, because I never played the remake of Wind Waker that came out on the Wii U. Was that where it came out?
Well,
yeah, I never had a chance to play that. And I never was interested in playing Twilight Princess because it was so divided. And wasn't that the one with motion controls as well, right?
Not necessarily. So because it came out on GameCube and Wii, so if you
Okay.
got it on Wii, it had like motion controls, like not hardly. You could sit down and play, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
So, and I guess people are excited too because with the Wind Waker remake, you don't have to worry about the dumb tablet thing that the Wii U had. You can just, it'll be on one screen for us and you don't have to worry about that.
So
So,
did they mention like if it would be ports of those Wii U games that were the remasters or of like the originals? Do they have
good
any kind
question. I don't know. I
of
think the assumption everyone's making is the Wii U ones, but
which
knowing
is why
Nintendo, it could totally be the OGs.
exactly, that's why I worry about is that would significantly lessen my excitement for it because then it's like that's just different. That's just not quite as cool because the remasters were really well done, and that would be the way to do it. In either case, though, these are $60 individually priced. I imagine, right? Like,
Not if they're the original ones.
yeah. Okay. Fair. I guess that would be asking a lot. Especially we just got like that Mario collection with Galaxy and Sunshine and 64
I could see 60
for
for
all three.
both of them.
Yeah, that's
Wii
probably
U
what it would be.
version. Because I think even if it's a Wii U versions, I don't think they can sell them 60 individually. I mean, they
Oh,
can.
for
It's
sure they
Nintendo.
will. For sure they will.
Let's make a bet then.
Oh, okay. I like it.
So I'm betting that they're packaged together for 60, and
The
you're
Wii U
saying no.
versions. Okay.
Yes.
I'll
The
say
the the
yeah, the Wii U versions, but they're individually $60.
okay. And if I win the bet, you have to start whenever you have an opening for a next game to play. You have to finally start Backbone.
Oh yeah, okay. It's fine with me.
Or unpacking.
Can
I'll
win
give you an
either way.
option, but you have to start one of them when you lose the bet. What's my parameters?
Oh man.
I got it. I got it. If I lose, I have to commit to at least watching the first season of Better Call Saul.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good.
Like, because I am eventually going to get around to it, but it'll give me the reason to like, no, you have to start it now. So
Which
I think
is
that's
same
fair.
for me. Like I literally have Backbone downloaded on my Xbox. I just haven't gotten to it yet. So yeah, that's a good one.
And I'm so the way it'll work is you start Backbone. If you don't like it for any reason, play Unpacking. I think that's the way to make
Okay,
it work.
sure.
So it's like a similar investment for both of us. Okay. Bet aside, let's get to the topic of the show. I want to talk about this Last of Us Part 1 conundrum. So I'm going to read through this and then we can talk through it. So The Last of Us Part 1 was released this week, September 2nd. We're recording on September 1st. And there are dozens of conversations surrounding this game. Some focus on the idea of calling it a remake and how some believe it's much closer to a remaster. The topic of its price, that being $70, and if it's too steep a number for what the game is. It also currently sits at an 89 on Metacritic, which is the lowest score any iteration of the game has received. For reference, the original is at a 95, and the remastered version is also a 95. So I wanted to have a discussion about how we feel what are the errors PlayStation and Naughty Dog made, and what we feel are the solutions or changes that could have been made to alleviate the conversation happening on the internet right now regarding the release of this game. We're not necessarily talking about the quality of the game itself. It's like the weird decisions that led to messed up optics for the game and all of that.
It's like a
And
lot
then
of
we can also have
the reviews just have me chuckling. Like, yeah, this is ultimately a masterpiece, 10 out of 10 game, but I don't really recommend paying $70 for it. Kind of weird stuff like that.
exactly. And the whole conversation about the responsibility of the consumer, like you can't sit there and be critical of this decision and then go out and buy it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like that whole story about how the what is it, boycott Call of Duty group on Steam, and then they went the day of Call of Duty's release and looked at the group, and everybody on that Steam group was playing Call of Duty, the new Call of Duty. It's really funny.
Oh, yeah.
Words are hollow without action, which is a quote I recently heard from the coach of the Chicago Bears. I thought that was a really good quote. Words are hollow without action, which is true.
And money talks. More simply.
Exactly. Lastly, how does this all sit with us knowing that a bundle collecting both the PS5 versions of the two games will likely see a release in the coming years, likely near the premiere of the HBO television show? There's a lot in here. So the first thing I want to talk about is I think the price, right? sure, there's a conversation to be had about like what is value, and you can't point at a game and necessarily say that's worth $70, it's worth $60. But as a consumer, I'd argue you can. You get to decide what you find is worth the number you're willing to pay, right? And for you and I, $70 is too much for this. Especially when I read about it having literally almost no gameplay changes to have it mirror what we saw the evolution of the game being in Last of Us 2, where it's a lot more visual. And obviously, this is being very general about the changes they made to the game. They didn't just move up the the visual detail slider and then port it. But I do think that's an issue. And I think pricing has been an issue for PlayStation, whether you're talking about the price increase of the console recently, which we talked about. You talk about the $70 in general for games, which is tough. You talk about PS Plus and how the tiers are weird and the value you get from them. There's a lot of pricing issues with PlayStation, and I think this is just another one of them. We kind of had the similar discussion way back when Spider-Man Remastered was announced, right? So I think just making it a bit cheaper is an easy solution and kind of lessens the blow for people, especially because would you agree, Dom, that the packaged both games is all but inevitable?
Yeah, because The Last of Us Part 2 never got an official PS5 version. So I think they patched the PS4 version so that it could, run at a higher frame rate or something on PS5s. But that's it. So it feels likely that game will get an actual PS5 SKU with like a handful of tiny improvements. Probably some of the new, a lot of the stuff they already have in that game. So it probably won't be even anything like the improvements they've made like beyond this game. Or you get what I'm saying. So that feels like
it would probably come with the beta access right to factions, like the multiplayer game. That'd be a good.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
I could see that. But then I don't even. They probably put it together. Yeah, why not? One box or one SKU, whatever they want to do with that. That feels likely. That to the extent of which they've milked this first game, there's still a little bit left in the udder for the second game.
Well, and I think that's a conversation in general, is that it feels like PlayStation is milking Last of Us for all it can, which is a bit of a bummer, because I think the more they do that, the less special it becomes overall, at least from my perspective. And I'm
not quite to that yet, only because they're not milking it by like what I in my head I visualize it as like, I don't know, like flattening it out, like just extending it in every direction. They're milking it for like every dollar of what already exists, but it's not like there's a new Last of Us game every second going off every side character, stuff like that. That's when I get like more worried about the quality of the stories and stuff. But
so yeah, that's interesting, because for me, I am more worried about, and obviously I'm going to be very, very much generalizing. I'm more worried about a game being released with no changes and them asking for the same amount of money. That's more milking to me than them potentially releasing a spin-off game that isn't good. Obviously, if it gets like multiple spin-off games and it's just they're making games to make games, that's one thing. But to me, it's worrisome. Like it's milking with less effort, in my opinion. And I know that sounds hyperbolic because it is, but it's like, I'd much rather be mad that they're milking it and that they're making a spin-off game that is bad than them releasing a game that's visually upgraded but changes almost nothing about the actual game. That to me is more worrisome. And I don't put as much pressure on Naughty Dog because even through interviews and stuff, it's kind of obvious that Neil Druckmann isn't the one behind this. Not saying he's against it necessarily, because he likes people to experience the story his team made. But I'm not holding it necessarily against Naughty Dog. I don't think Naughty Dog was the one that was hammering home, let's do a PS5 version of The Last of Us 1. I think PlayStation presented them with probably the budget and the project opportunity, and Neil and his team thought about it, it's cool, let's do it. But I don't think they were necessarily the ones like, this is a must do for us, So I don't really blame them that much.
I'm trying to remember, and I might be wrong on this, but PlayStation had that support studio who I thought, like one of Schreier's reports, said that the support studio had this idea and they had already started working on it, at least to get a demo created. And they showed Sony, they showed PlayStation, and PlayStation said, yeah, that's great, but we're going to have Naughty Dog finish it, which is like, okay, Naughty Dog, maybe, I think you're probably right, where it didn't seem like, when he was talking about it, Neil Druckmann wasn't like, he was trying really hard to like sell all the improvements on it. Frankly, the extent of which they've been doing that, I think is telling. When they have to explain in great detail,
over-explain,
each like little thing they improved on, which like, yeah, I know a lot of work went into it, and all that kind of stuff, but like they're really doing their best to try to justify the price, and that, I think that tells you a lot. They're, instead of just putting something out there, like how much of that is going to happen for God of War Ragnarok? Hardly. I doubt much of anything. We'll get one really good state of play that explains some new systems, and then you're going to put it out there, and that thing's just going to sell, right? They're just going to let it talk for itself instead of having to do too much of the selling.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, I think this game is still going to sell very well, but I do think it's a bit of a miss to have it release in this place where I think it could exponentially sell even more, because I think one thing that often gets missed in conversations about game purchases is like not everybody can purchase dozens of games each year. Like it is a very much a hobby that requires a substantial amount of side income, you know what I mean? So with God of War Ragnarok on the horizon, it's like, would I spend $70 on that or $70 on a visual improvement of a game that, if you're excited for God of War Ragnarok, likely you already own Last of Us anyways, you know what I mean? So it's like, which one do you spend money on? I think it's pretty obvious, right? So
and I think the biggest problem, because the $70 specifically versus like $60 thing, that's obviously like a Sony, a PlayStation wide problem that, like, I mean, to us it's a problem. I don't know how well it's working out for them or not, but I think like separating, like kind of ignoring that part of it, I think this is just simply too close. It's just too soon. Because if there wasn't just a remaster on the previous generation, like these conversations about, because to me this is clearly a remake, like very clearly, but from how they've described like what the work they put into it, that's what I envision. Remake is mostly a marketing term anyway, but like it's just because the previous versions are so recent that it doesn't feel as much like a remake, you know. And so that's a fair thing to question. Whereas I think if the PS4 remastered version never existed and this was instead a remake of a PS3 game, much like Demon Souls, which also sold for $70 and was the same exact game, few minor system changes, but otherwise it just looked better. Same exact thing, but this conversation didn't happen at all with Demon Souls when that was remade. So I think that's like the biggest problem that they have with this. I still think it's too much money, even in that case. Like $70 for Demon Souls is, it's a little bit longer of a game, so it's a little easier to swallow. So I think that, and also the other problem with it is it's less content. The remastered and the original games both had the factions multiplayer mode, which is still going on today in the remastered version. Maybe even the PS3 one. I'm not sure about that. It couldn't be. That's too old. But like, you're all of this on top of that, and we're not getting the multiplayer mode that the PS Plus remastered version you can get today does include it. Like, so you're paying more for less content. It looks better, sure, but yeah, I think those are kind of the two biggest problems for me. Is like, it's the recency to the previous version and the lack of including the multiplayer mode that was in the previous version. Like, I can't stand by that in any sense.
And to compare it to something that I think is near and dear to us, I think it'd be the equivalent of if Blue Point did a visual update to the remake, the remaster of the original Dark Souls, because that came out a few years ago, right? If they released that this year and it was a visually updated version of Dark Souls remastered and it was selling for $70, I would also have an issue with it, because to your point, right, it's a game that's getting visually restored, but it isn't even that old.
But say they did that, but cut out the multiplayer. What?
Exactly. That's even a better point. Yeah, because this doesn't even have factions in it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those like stepping on a rake moments that could have totally been avoided. And the most frustrating thing is that like all of this takes away from the work that Naughty Dog did on this game, because it is impressive. I do think when you see them side by side, it's tough. Like if I was a kid growing up, Dom, and I'm like, fine, I'll just buy this because I want to see these visual updates. I'd cross my fingers and hope that my parents read my Christmas list of wanting God of War Ragnarok and they got it for me. Because when you put them side by side, this version of this game being released in God of War Ragnarok, like I think it's pretty easy to determine which one most people are going to want to spend $70 on. And that doesn't take away from the quality of Last of Us Part 1. Like we all know how good that game is. It's a bummer. And it's clear because the Metacritic scores are showing that too, that despite it being the same game virtually, there's just so many things surrounding it that don't make it as celebrated as it could have been. Maybe not should, but definitely could have been. So it's a bummer. It just irritates me because.
And they know all this, right? Like they certainly had many conversations about all this stuff, right? And at the end of the day, to me, I feel like they justified it like with ego. And that's what I think maybe bothers me the most, and where like I
and
do
spreadsheets.
I don't know. We'll see. I hope that it doesn't sell. I hate saying something like that. I don't want to say that. You know what I mean? I hope that they get the message that this was the wrong way to do it, I guess, and that they don't blame Naughty Dog themselves necessarily, right? That's a better way to word it, instead of I hope it sells shit, or But it just feels like all this stuff, they considered all of it, and then at the end of the day, they said, well, it's The Last of Us. It's like one of the greatest games of all time, so like we could do it. For any other game, we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't get away with it, but it's The Last of Us, so we can do it. And that's what I think, like, it really irks me about it. Because they might not be wrong, we'll see again, but even if you're right, like, don't do that. Don't be like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Jim Ryan, unfortunately, hasn't shown us that he's going to act any way different than that, unfortunately. The tough thing, too, is, like, between the PlayStation 5 price increase and this, man, they are so lucky that God of War Ragnarok is coming out this year. Because if that game wasn't coming out till next year and we didn't get, like, a PlayStation showcase or something this year, it would just continuously build onto it of itself. But they kind of have a scapegoat in God of War Ragnarok that it's going to kind of win back a lot of goodwill with people, because I highly doubt that game is anything short of incredible. So it's just a bummer. And now me and you have to wait for a price decrease. Just sit here waiting, because I'm not going to give in. I'm not.
I'm not either. I'm sticking to it. I mean, this is going to be on YouTube of me saying it, so like I can't be one of those people in the Call of Duty group that you go in their Steam activity.
Yeah, this is the part of the podcast on YouTube where I Photoshop in a picture of it, says you playing it on PS5.
You should go back in and like have me like painting myself with the clown makeup or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they'll just Photoshop you into the thing. Oh man, I had a tweet like that. It was like me whenever I buy Madden and NBA 2K every year. That's so funny. It's a picture of a clown. Let's get into what we've been playing. I'm assuming you haven't dove into Cult of the Lamb yet, right?
No, I got some other cool stuff you'll like to hear about though.
Okay, so I only have one game of note to talk about. The first one isn't really a big note, but I hopped back into MTG Arena, Magic the Gathering Arena, having a blast with it. I was just having an itch to play a card game. Magic the Gathering is my card game of choice. Having fun with it. I've talked about Magic tons on this podcast in years past, but the best thing about that game is that you can cater decks to however you want to play, and there's cards that fit play styles and certain things you want to do. So recently, during the last standard block, which is like they rotate in and out cards to use for like competitive play, just because like some stuff can become super overpowered and it helps change the meta of the game, so it's always refreshing every couple of months, Dom. The most recent standard season, I was running a life gain deck. It's green and white. Green usually has cards about like growth or empowering your creatures, and white is usually spawning a bunch of creatures on the board or healing yourself. So it's just a deck where like I had creatures that would get stronger when you healed yourself. So not only are you getting more health, but your creatures are getting stronger. So it's kind of annoying to deal with. So that was pretty fun. But the game I wanted to talk about is a new Game Pass entry. I've still been playing Cult of the Lamb, but like I said, I want to wait to talk about that game with you until you play it. But have you heard of Tinykin?
No.
So Tinykin, Tinykin, is a new Game Pass title. And I saw it come to Game Pass. And then I saw Jeff Grubb from GamesBeat and a lot of other people, Matt Piscatella from the MPD group, talking about the game and how fun it was. And then I looked it up and I saw the art style and I was like, oh, this is cool. It's like very Paper Mario-ish, where it's like the world is 3D, but the characters are 2D. And it's very bright, colorful, cartoony art style. And it functions like Pikmin. So essentially the game revolves around you collecting these little tiny kins, I believe. That's why it's called Tiny Kin. And the different colored ones do different things. So the pink ones are general purpose, where you throw them at stuff. You throw a bunch of them at something to move the object. There's red ones that explode on contact, and there's objects around these open levels that have you needing to gather different versions of these characters to use to solve puzzles. And there's also like a collectathon aspect of certain items or objectives you have to accomplish. I've only played about 40 minutes of it. I'm on the first level. It takes place in basically a giant human house, but you're a tiny person. And the story talks about how like you are actually humans from a different planet, and you want to find out where humans originate from. So it's looks like a really fun concept. The gameplay is really fun. It's simple. It's totally one of those games where you can listen to a podcast and play it. It's fun to go around and experiment and find the different types of kins and figure out what each of them do. There's like creatures you run into that you need to solve specific puzzles. It's really fun. I'm having a blast with it. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, and it just feels to me like the classic PS2 licensed games, but in the best of ways. Just a fun platformer. Having a blast with it.
Yeah, I'm watching some like gameplay and stuff as we speak, and yeah, a pretty accurate description. There's something about when you're small and you're in a kid's bedroom, like okay, you're like jumping on these guitar strings and down the call that the shaft of the guitar. What do you call that?
I'm not a musician. You're asking the wrong person. I have no
There's got to be
idea.
a better. Anyway, yeah, there's something cool about anytime you're small. The neck, that feels like it makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks really cool. Again, I like when you're small. I don't know. It's a wonder I haven't tried out Grounded yet. And then I see the Pikmin elements you're talking about, those little things following you around. And yeah, this does look cool. This is interesting.
And whenever you get introduced to new characters or mechanics of the game, there's these short animated segments that honestly, if this developer wants to, I think they can make a really fun animated show out of it, even if it's like internet shorts, because they're really engaging and fun, and they're really good at expressing the character. So it's a good time, and it's on Game Pass, so worth the risk, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
cool.
It's very early, but I think if it continues to build on the stuff it's having me do, it'll probably end up in my top 10 for the year. Like, that's really how much I'm enjoying this game, and I'm only 40 minutes in. Obviously, things could change or could get stale, but so far I'm having a blast.
I'm watching like a montage of gameplay, and like there's a lot of different shit going on, like a lot of different types of puzzles and like ways to interact with the little guys. So I feel like if you're only 40 minutes in, I feel like there's a lot more to build based on what I'm seeing.
And if anything gives me Toy Story vibes, it immediately wins me over, like you
That's
said,
what I'm
being a
thinking
tiny
of.
person in a big house. Yeah,
That's what
just
it felt like.
so nostalgic.
And then like just on Toy Story, when like they set up the like Hot Wheels ramp and Buzz is like flying through that, or like on the thing, and he's flying through the air, and he hits the baby carousel thing and spins around. That's what this feels like except it's puzzles. And
yeah, this is to Toy Story what Grounded is to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and both of them are just like, yeah, hit me in the nostalgia.
Okay, I forgot about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids too. That's yeah, okay. No, I might poke around on this too. Not man, I love Game Pass, dude. I can't even.
It's definitely worth it, Dom. Just download it and check it out. It's fun.
Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. Obviously, House of the Dragon is good. Don't want to spend too much time on TV. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Man, and House of the Dragon, like, it's another good episode, and things are moving fast, and I'm like interested, and then we're getting into this past episode, and like I've like audibly gagged and almost puked on myself when they introduced the princess that they wanted him to marry, and she's like freaking 10 years old. They're like, because they talk about her, right? And he's like, she's kind of young, and so in my head I'm thinking it's probably like a teenager, right? But and he's talking to her all of a sudden, I'm like, That's not her, right? That's a 10-year-old.
Well, they
Even
showed her
for
in the
Game of
previous
Thrones.
episode when they were watching the jousting. They showed her
Oh,
and her
okay.
brother sitting underneath their parents.
Did they
So when
point
the
her?
next
Oh,
episode happened, I was like, no. It
okay.
had to be somebody we didn't see. And I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Which sadly, like, obviously, House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones isn't historically accurate, but certain aspects of it are things that happen in real life, and that's one of them. And it's just, ugh, so gross.
Yeah, it did not make me. They're going really hard into the terrifying things.
Well,
Anyway,
the cool thing is when you find out that there's going to be a 10-year jump in the show, which I'm excited about.
I did not know that. Ooh.
That's not a spoiler either. That's public knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously this show takes place hundreds of years, specifically, 172 years before Daenerys Targaryen
Yeah,
was born.
that sounds right. Yeah.
So people are wondering, like, well, the show's going to be multiple seasons, but how are they going to handle it getting to modern day? You know what I mean by modern day in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, apparently there's going to be a 10-year jump, which makes sense because when I was looking at the IMDb for the show months ago, I was like, why is there two people cast as this person, or did they recast it? Turns out that, like, yeah, the actresses
sure.
for Rhaenyra and the Hightower girl, I forget her name, Alicent? I think that's right.
Yeah, it's because it's. I thought it was Allison naturally, but yeah, it's Alicent, the C and T or whatever.
Yeah, so apparently there's going to be a 10-year jump at some point in the season. I don't know when. It could be the second to last episode of the finale. But then, we're going to lose the current actresses, which is a shame because they're both phenomenal. And then we're going to get the new actresses.
Didn't realize that. Shoot, what else? So, speaking of Game Pass, I finally got around to playing Inside. And it was a cool, dark, creepy puzzle game. And then I got to the end, and what the hell was that?
Oh, the amorphous being, right?
Yeah, I didn't really see it going quite that way. It just was like, because you don't really know. Probably like a lot of people have already played Inside, but like it's really cool, and it felt like kind of like a Handmaid's Tale or something super dystopian, where like everyone is trying to capture you for like some kind of experiments that you start to see going on as you progress through the levels and stuff, and like everyone's in on it. But then yeah, you get to like the end of the game and you just unleash this chamber with this giant amorphous human blob, which is limbs hanging out the sides, and then you finally just start. It was kind of satisfying though, because you just get to start trucking through walls and like over top of these annoying guards and stuff and squishing people. And the most hilarious part was you come up to like someone's office as this amorphous blob that's really large, and there's like one executive guy at his desk, and he starts to get scared and he backs up to his window, which is his whole wall as a window, and you just roll right through him in probably like 100-foot drop, and he is right there to cushion your fall, and he just splats underneath you. And I laughed when that happened. Like, Jesus, this game is so wild.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is it ramps up in its craziness towards the end, and then there's just the ending that's like very somber and quiet, and you kind of like are introspective of like, you know, you just it ramps up so quickly to like you're this kid, and then you become this amorphous being, and you're destroying everything in your path, and then you quietly just reside on this beach, and it's like, what now? I just like caused all of this, and like, what's the fate of this thing now? Like, after all of the adrenaline is gone, what's left is like depressing and sad, and like the reality of the whole situation. It's just like, ugh.
Yeah. No, that's how I kind of felt like, because it was like ramping up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I escaped. I don't know what to do as this thing now. But then he just kind of parks it, and I'm like, oh, am I dead? No, he's still moving. He's still breathing. Can't control him anymore. Is the game over? What's going on? And it just felt like, yeah, I was like, weird. Like, yeah, I guess this is the end, but so what? Yeah, it was weird. I don't know how I feel about it entirely.
But that's good, right? Because art is supposed to make you feel, and it might not make you feel anything specific, but the fact that you are thinking about it and you are unsure, honestly, it's very similar to how I felt at the end of Last of Us Part 2. It's just, you're full of emotion, but you don't necessarily know what emotions you are feeling or what you should feel,
or what
but
to
you
do
just
with it.
feel something. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And it was been a few days since I finished it, and I still am thinking about it like a little bit each day. Like, so, ugh.
And the boy with the long hair is so haunting. Underwater.
Oh, the water creature. Yeah, I don't know what the.
Yeah.
There's cool stuff though, like cool elements with the puzzles and how they. It was a very clever game. The gameplay was really good too. In addition to all the weirdness. So yeah, I really enjoyed Inside. It was a really cool game.
It was a good evolution of. You played Limbo, right? Way back when.
Never played Limbo.
You should play Limbo. I don't know if it's on Game Pass, but it's also really good. That one has it's a more definitive ending than this one, but it is still rather obtuse because that's just like Playdead's thing. But that game is really good too. Inside feels like it's more about the environment. The puzzles are still really well designed and stuff, but that one feels like it's trying to more to immerse you in the world, whereas Limbo is much more simplistic in having you focus on the puzzles, if that makes sense. Still does good world building, but it's clearly the first game, and Inside was the evolution. I'm glad you finally played it, though.
Yeah, I finally got around to it. That's been on the shame list for a while. I also put a little bit more time into Unsighted, and I love it, man. Like, I had started it, and I briefly talked about it. I can't remember if I was on the show last week or it was just to you, but I'm like, oh yeah, I really love the art style. The combat's pretty fun. It's kind of like Hyper Light Drifter, but there's dialogue, and that kind of stuff. But then it opens up, and there's a town, and there's shops, and then I have to go into these 5 different dungeons to collect these 5 different pieces of this thing so I can win. And I'm like, oh yeah, we got ourselves a 2D Zelda game here, and that's really what I'm. It's Hyper Light Drifter mixed with a 2D Zelda game, and I'm all about it. It feels super smooth. It's difficult too, like just the right amount of difficult. It feels a bit kind of like Death's Door in that sense, where like it was challenging but not like stupidly so. It's kind of like that. So I'm looking forward to playing this game more because I'm still only a few hours in. But yeah, like really, again, Game Pass. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found this or known of it, heard of it, anything. So I'm really happy with it. It's called Unsighted. Again, absolutely recommend it, unless something drastic changes by the end of it. But I'm loving the shit out of it.
Let's change the bet so we're both committed to a Game Pass game. So if I lose instead of the Better Call Saul thing, we could do that on a future bet if I haven't started it by then. Let's do Unsighted. So if you win, I have to play Unsighted, and then you're obviously Backbone and Unpacking, depending on how that goes. Because I have Unsighted downloaded, but it's there. It's downloaded,
yeah.
So this will give me a reason. So we'll do that. We'll switch it up. Lastly, before we head out, you told me you enjoyed Prey.
Oh man, that's right. Yeah, I watched Prey on Hulu. I've never watched an Alien movie or a Predator or an Alien vs Predator movie or any of that stuff. I have no idea. I know of the Predator, that like he hunts people, right? And like what he looked like. That's about all I knew. And so this was more than anything just absolutely badass. I don't watch all that many like action movies.
Same.
So I'm not like. Actually, the last action movie I watched, speaking of Better Call Saul, was called Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. And
oh yeah,
it was so dumb and corny, and it made me think of like, and I love Bob Odenkirk, but I was just like, is this like what action movies are? Like all those Jason Statham movies and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, I just was like, now I'm reminded like why I don't really watch this kind of stuff so much anymore. But anyway, this movie Prey was just absolutely badass because we just have like a native tribe. I don't know where we are in the world. I don't remember if it says or not, but like what look like, like Native Americans, like bow and arrows and spears and shit like that. And then they're hunting a lion, I think, at the beginning, and of course the predator, like they don't even know, he's just invisible, which I'm like, and just cuts this snake in half down the middle and is just ripping apart wolves and just having his way with everything else in this forest or whatever. I'm like, these people are going to get their shit rocked by this guy. Like Predator is an absolute beast, just unstoppable and like hunting, and I don't know. And of course that largely is what happens. But then to have what seemed like Frenchmen or Europeans or whatever trying to like colonize or whatever the heck they're doing, coming into, and they play a role, kind of a thing. I don't know. It just like it was just really cool. Great ending. It's not like anything too shocking of how it ends, but the two main characters, like the girl and what I think was her older brother, I'm not sure. He was great too. Just like the shit they did though, like obviously I mentioned like they're using bow and arrows and like really primitive stuff, but like they have like this war cry, that like in almost any context I would think is silly and a joke, and it's like someone like, you know, being racist in a dumb Halloween costume that was shot, you know what I mean? But it was so badass. Like when the older brother character is like riding around on his horse, basically kind of circling the predator, and was just shouting this fucking scream, and it was like, I was like, oh dude, this is awesome. I've never like, I don't know, totally not my type of movie typically, but I was fully bought in. This is cool as hell. And it ends, you know, again, not in a too shocking of a way, but like certainly we could do more here, and I'll be in if they do more of this kind of stuff for sure. It was so cool.
Yeah, the calls are cool because it reminds me of whenever you see like Samoans or Tongans. Forgive me if it's only one specific type of Pacific Islander that do the haka. You know, like sometimes they'll do it before like a sporting event, like a rugby match or football game. Have you seen that?
No,
Where they all line up and they do like the Uga Taka, and they like do all the arm
Okay.
movements and like the shouting. That stuff's so cool. And yeah, to your point too, it's like whenever you hear these parts of these cultures, it's just like, oh, it's so primal, and like, I don't know, it's awesome. One of the things with the lead actress, Amber Midthunder, which by the way, dope name. There's this idea of them possibly making Wolverine indigenous in the MCU, which I think is a really cool idea. Based on how the characters from the Canadian wilderness, Logan, but you know, there's obviously a lot of indigenous tribes up there, and it's also unsure if they're going to do the male version being Logan or the female Wolverine being Laura Kinney. And people are saying if they decide to do the indigenous female Wolverine, that she should be up for the role, and I agree. I would love to have her in the MCU because she's a phenomenal actress. The fact that she can do so much with so little dialogue. There's a version of this movie, Dom, where you can watch it all with Comanche language, which is like an indigenous language, Comanche, that's not a typical subtitle, right, for movies. So it's really neat that they did that here.
I mean,
exactly.
Like there's not that much speaking in general. You said, yeah, there's not that much dialogue, and like you could in the Frenchman, you don't know what they're saying most of the time. But yeah. Oh, that was the other thing. It felt like it was made for like when they do speak, it's in English, but it's like kind of like implied. Like obviously they're not speaking English. They wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And that's kind of I can't remember how, but like that made sense in my head. I was like, but they just basically made this in English for me.
Exactly, yeah.
But they wouldn't be speaking English here. Yeah.
And I love the parallels they draw between, like, there's a point where she finds all of the dead buffalo on the plains.
Yes.
And your immediate thought is, I can't believe the predator killed all these things. You're like,
yeah.
And then she finds like a cigar, and you're like, oh, this isn't the predator. It's the actual predators of the land, the colonists.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many cool aspects of it. The way she gets revenge on the French colonist for her brother. Yeah. And that whole scene is brutal. It's just very well shot. Even though the movie doesn't have a huge budget, everything looks good. The Predator was shot all practically. They hired this like 7-foot tall actor and did all the prosthetics, and it looks phenomenal. So in the lore, what I found out is that the way the predators, whenever they land somewhere new, their whole job is to find the apex predator, Dom. And that's why throughout the movie, at the point where he kills the snake, he watches like the rat eats the bug, the snake eats the rat.
It's just going up the food chain.
Yeah, and then he kills the snake, and then he kills the wolf, and then the bear fight is sick by the beaver dam, which I thought was so well done. And the dog chasing away the bear and everything. It's like, oh no.
And when she figures that out, and she like basically lets the one colonizer guy kind of like target her just so that the predator would go after him instead of her. And she says something clever about it. I can't remember what, but I'm like, yeah, I knew she would be able to like outsmart this thing eventually, because you have to, because he's just so physically dominant and has all these tools. But
well, and then the whole thing about her going, I forgot what the actual ritual is called, but in order to become like the village warrior, you have to go out and kill something that could easily kill you. So that's why they originally got to kill the mountain lion. She doesn't get it. Her brother does. Later on, he tells her the way he killed it is the way she told him to kill it. Her
Right.
strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and her version of that is killing the predator, which is really cool. Such a good movie. And like that's the cool thing is it's not like sure, like you said, there's enough narrative meat there to build on it, but they don't need to. And
Yeah.
it works on its own. Me and you who have very little prior knowledge of the series, it works. It's not a long film. Like I said, it's not a huge budget film, but it is good. And it's just so good. I think that's it for this week's show. Next week, we're either recording on the 8th or the 9th, which I don't know when those presentations are happening, so we might have information on what happened at the Disney one, or we might not. Other than that, yeah, we're probably going to be talking about, I'll probably be talking about Tinykin. You'll probably have some more Unsighted to talk about and all of that good stuff. And yeah, we'll catch you guys next time. If you can, please follow us on YouTube, Controlled Interest, search us up, subscribe, like the video, and comment. Let us know if you're excited for The Last of Us Part 1 or if you're holding out for a sale like we are. On Twitter, you can find us collectively at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. You can follow Dom at Dom Kenobi, but the O and OB is the number 0, not the letter O. And I'm at Jerrad Wyche, JERRADWYCHE. Other than that, check us out on the podcast services, whether that's Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all of that stuff. And we'll see you guys next time.